Adventure Ho Illumineers, and welcome back to another episode of the DuckTale Dads. I'm one of your hosts, Nathaniel, back in studio with Ryan and Mack. Gentlemen, it's good to be back with you both.
Welcome back, sir. It's nice to have you back on the pod. Now let's hope the connection stays through, as we tend to fall into a little bit of a deep well, pun intended, when it comes to all of our connection issues over the course of the last couple months. But welcome back, Nathaniel.
The dad jokes go crazy. But I think before we jump into Whispers, a lot of fun stuff to discuss there, particularly with some first impressions. We do need to start us off with the usual, what is new in your world. So let's go ahead and have Ryan, why don't you start us off? What's new in your world, man?
Personal front, just trying to fight through some nights of lack of sleep, as we have been challenged with recently. Over the weekend, we had my mother-in-law come up and stay with us because my wife was at a conference, and so my mother-in-law came up and helped watch the kids, and that was really nice to have them up, and always good to see them. Was able to get out to a pre-release event with the mother-in-law taking over for childcare duties at home. And then Saturday we were able to go to a birthday party, which was a fun time as well for a couple of our friends. Actually saw Nathaniel there and was a little bit surprised, but also not surprised at the same time. And it was a fun little parents' night out, it seemed like. So, but yeah, on the Lorcana front, just enjoying Whispers. Really enjoyed the pre-release event. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little later on in the podcast. And just opening packs, playing some Pack Rush with my wife, which is always a blast. Our favorite way to open packs now is just Pack Rush, and pray there's no Enchanted that we're shuffling up really roughly through those decks. Mac, what's new in your world?
Yeah, shuffling of the Enchanted with Pack Rush is absolutely... It's something, as I've gotten to the course of playing in Lorcana, I've become less and less nervous shuffling expensive cards in my deck, but still a Pack Rush Enchanted with no sleeves. I don't think I'll ever get over that. So I would definitely feel, quote unquote, your nervous energy whenever you go through a Pack Rush with your wife. What's new in my world? Lorcana related, really not much. But I've been just kind of looking in the background with opening weekend, what tends to be the top decks, and thankfully one of the decks that I've been trying to run over the course of the last couple sets, or at least thinking about, seems to be one that's finally made its way into maybe even S tier, so at least A tier for sure. That would be Sapphire Steel. I've been brewing or thinking about that deck. That's actually the second deck that I thought about running in Milwaukee was Sapphire Steel, but I just didn't think it was quite good enough at the time. But now I think with Whispers, that is a very strong combination, and I'm very excited to start testing that. However, I didn't do any release events, so in terms of play, nothing on that from my end, because non-Lorcana related, it seems like the last 2 weeks I've talked about sicknesses in my house, and it's hit me last weekend, which is a little unfortunate. It was my birthday last weekend. So I spent most of my birthday just kind of cruising through as best as I could, with kind of the sore throat and runny nose situation that my lovely boys passed on to me. But it is what it is. I got my family bought me some additional board games, so that was really fun to open that, and they were very much excited. My boys were very much excited to hand that over to me. What was really funny too is my wife, I'm not a big cake or like pie or any sort of person when it comes to their birthday, and but we are very much into the donuts at our local Hy-Vee, so shout out Hy-Vee. It was funny, it was my birthday morning and I got up with the boys, and my youngest, it must have been talking about it with my wife when she was putting him down to bed the night before, but he woke up and he looked at me and he said, "Dad, it's your birthday. Now we can get a donut and put a candle in it." So he's definitely spoiled what my wife had planned with my little one, because they were planning to go to Hy-Vee, get a dozen donuts and bring them home, and then do a candle in the donut. And then when my wife woke up, I told her the story, and she just kind of laughed at the little one. So that was a good time. But other than that, shout out one last shout out. Shout out to the Spice Lord himself. Little did I know, him and I, Lance and I, share the same birthday. So happy birthday, Lance. Hope you had a good time with your family on your birthday celebration. It's new in my world. Now let's move it back to you, Nathaniel. What's new in your world?
Yeah, happy birthday to the Spice Lord Lance. What a guy. Also, wow, what a note about and a good reminder about not telling any type of surprise to your under 5-year-olds out there. Man, they have they always find a way, right, to mention that little oopsie. That's super cute. So on my end, I unfortunately was unable to be on the pod last week. I was actually traveling out west to Seattle, but fortunately on the way back, it was release day when I flew back in. So on my way home, I stopped into a game store that had just gotten in some Whispers, that day, a couple days prior, right, waiting to put it on the shelf. So I did get to pick up some product like on release day, or pre-release day, which felt really cool. I just grabbed a few packs, but that was really fun to like have hands-on new product like immediately. That's not been the case the last couple sets for me. And yeah, so that's probably the biggest thing for me from a Lorcana perspective. On a personal note, it is very much deep into the autumn season, so that means all the leaves are falling or have fallen. We have a lot of trees in our yard, which means we have a tremendous amount of leaves, and so I spent a good chunk of my weekend bagging those up in like sub 30 degree weather. I actually, fun fact, I bagged over 1,200 gallons of leaves. So yeah, it took a while. There's 42 bags. I think we talked about this this last spring/summer, where my little town does like junk day, so they come and pick up junk. Well, my little town also does like fall cleanup day, where they swing by with like yard waste trucks, and any leaves or anything like that, they just pick them up right from your like front yard. And so I don't have to like take them to a yard waste location. So super cool. You just got to get rid of them very conveniently in that case. So I got a nice wall of bags in the front of my yard right now. But with that, I think it's probably time, gentlemen, that we talk a little bit about these Whispers and all these wells. But I think before we do, I think Ryan, you had a note?
Yeah, so on the podcast last week, in my infinite hype for the set, I talked about the Stone by Day ability, or we were talking about the Stone by Day ability on the gargoyle characters, and I was mistaken in my reading of it and interpretation of that ability, and it simply reads, they cannot ready if you have 3 or more cards in hand. They just cannot ready, period. End of statement, end of clause. So shout out to one of our listeners, Michael. Appreciate you for highlighting that and letting us know that that was a misinterpretation that did come up in my pre-release event, actually. So it was very timely and very, very helpful to have that information in hand rather than looking like a dummy trying to play my Next Stop Olympus on my gargoyle character that was stuck sideways because I had 3 cards in hand. So that was interesting, but appreciate you, Michael, for sending us that note, making sure that we are spreading the right information and we're all on the same page when it comes to gameplay mechanics, because a lot of new stuff came out, a lot of new interactions happened, and we just get to explore it all together, which is one of the joys of playing Lorcana with friends and at sealed events or at pre-release events in general.
So it sounds like, Judge, that you can't outrun Day in this case if you do have 3 or more cards in your hand. You are locked with those gargoyles. By the way, can we just take 1 second to say how absolutely incredible it is that gargoyles is in this game? I don't know about you guys, but as a very little kid, like 25 years ago, I loved gargoyles as a show. I was probably too young to be watching that, but man, it was awesome. And like, I think I had action figures too, of a few of them, like, some little that you could play, whatever. And it just, the fact that that's in the game is great. And the fact that there's like some pretty dang good characters in it is also great, particularly in the Amethyst and Steel variety. But yeah, I'm absolutely hyped for that. And thank you, Michael, for kind of doing the rule clarification. Maybe something, guys, we can maybe throw in every once in a while, maybe a little segment on just like a specific kind of new rule thing to call out that we're seeing or hearing about, because there's a lot of interesting game mechanics. I see sometimes on social media, this will pop up actually, where it'll be like judge, and it'll kind of talk through some unique scenarios that can tend to happen with some card combinations. And even then, right, like where you have like a very clear, what seems to be a very clear scenario, a lot of times there's still confusion with a lot of people in the community, right, about like what is the right call here. So this game continues to have that, I think, as we just noted. But that's part of what makes it fun, right? Is it the ever kind of changing mechanics that are being released into the game. So with that, I think we should probably get into our most recent gameplay experience. Ryan, you were very fortunate to join our resident Scrooge McDuck this last weekend and play a little bit of Seal.
Yeah, man, I love a good sealed event, especially on pre-release day. It's just so exciting to get the new cards in hand and play with all the new interactions. Local card shop's great about it too. It's a very reasonable price. Everyone gets extra packs. It's well worth everyone's time and investment. So it was always a favorite spot to go to that game shop for us. So yeah, I met Connor there, and it was a good time opening packs, building our decks. Had a pretty successful day. Went 2-1. It was 2-0, and then lost to somebody in the third round there. That just had a bigger deck than I did. That's all what it came down to. I had a little bit more on the lower end of the curve to kind of even things out. Try not to get blown out of the water by some of the more aggro-leaning sealed decks that were developed. And my opponent in the third round just had a bigger deck. That's what it came down to at the end. But yeah, it was able to pull my first legendary of the set in my sealed packs. So I got to play around and shuffle up a Steel Goliath during the sealed event, which, as you can imagine, is incredibly powerful in that limited format. By the time you get to six, you're likely out of cards anyways at that point. So it's just right on curve, drop a Goliath and keep on trucking with two more cards in your hand. Um, when I played it in the third match, I played it in the first game of the third match, and my opponent just goes, "Ooh, that's really bad for me. He played that empty-handed. That's perfect, and that is really bad for me." As he was like shuffling up his cards and on his turn, it's like, "All right, well, that sounds great for me then, I guess." I'm just getting out on that tempo, getting those extra cards. I did recognize that it added some interesting little gameplay mechanics as well, or gameplay play lines, I suppose, where you're trying to like build your hand with the Goliath and then shed it really fast. So you want this like combination of both big cards and small cards. And when I was playing it in sealed and I was playing with all the just different ink colors, I thought, man, this is going to be an amazing Amethyst Steel card. This is exactly what this deck wants to do. You get to 6 ink. Hope you just draw into 2 3 cost characters, or a 3 cost and a 4 cost, so then you can ink whatever you draw next, and then just drop as much things on the board as you can, take as many game actions as you can on your turn, and then refill with 2 more cards at the end of that turn. And it just keeps the cycle going. A little less snowbally than Doc, I will say, since it is that slow card draw at the end of your turn. You don't get to actively use those cards on your turn. That being said, I mean, it's a 6/5 body. It's a 6 strength, 5 willpower. It's questing for 2. It has this constant draw ability. It's gonna at least take something out on if it turns sideways or gets caught sideways. I mean, it's a great card overall. Other interesting interactions. I found out that the 6 cost uninkable green Little John is probably my least favorite card to lose to, just because it feels so inevitable, and there's nothing in a sealed format, especially, that you can do about it, since there's such limited removal, and usually that card gets played really, really late in the game after you've already had to burn your removal on something else before that. And it's just it's a massive body. It quests for 3. You can boost it for 3 ink, and then you can ready it with no stipulations, just ready the character. So you can quest again for another 3. And then if you have a way to boost it again from an external source, like a Blessed Bagpipes or Emily Quackfaster, then you can ready it again with the boost, out external boost, and then quest again for another 3. So you can quest for 9, or you can just quest for 3 and ready it, and then threaten to quest for 6 on the next turn. I mean, it's like, I mean, you get half your lore in 2 turns from just one character. It's just unbelievable. And that it was probably my least favorite way to lose games, and I lost to it twice. So that felt great. But yeah, otherwise, I had a really great time opening packs. Been able to open some was able to purchase a couple of booster boxes as well to add to the collection, and been right on track with ratios, and that's all we're looking for. Just getting the right number of legendaries and not having a dud box, if you will. But yeah, so being able to open those packs and play Pack Rush, like I mentioned in the open of the podcast, that's our favorite way to open packs here at our house, is just playing Pack Rush against each other. Noticing that the Pack Rush is actually a little bit slower this set than Fabled, or maybe there's just more card draw this set than Fabled, because usually in Fabled we were able to get through like 2 full games with brand new cards the whole time, 2 full Pack Rush games with brand new cards the whole time during Fabled, and we're like 1.5, 1.25 uh games of new cards this set. So I think it might just be more card draw. It might just be slower games because they're bigger bodies, bigger characters that are being played to the board. But yeah, been not. I personally have not had any crazy pulls, I would say, but I will say that of the first booster box we opened, the first 2 packs that we pulled out, we didn't pull the top ones. My wife is just wants to pull the random one from the middle of the box for some reason. So she just dives her hand in, you lose it, you lose sight of the hand for a second, and all of a sudden it comes out with a pack. It's like bobbing for apples. It's kind of funny. But we gave the first 2 packs of the box to our little one, our toddler. So our toddler got to open those cards and flip through them. And so now that is 2 packs in my toddler's life that they have opened. And they have pulled 2 legendaries. They pulled a Demona out of one of the packs, and they pulled a Shere Khan out of the other one. So every single pack that comes through this house now, I think, has to go through the toddler's hands, just because it's a 100% ratio at this point. So you can't really fight the facts. It's all it really is.
So the pack luck has passed through genetics now, it sounds like, with the little one. So not quite the enchanted route like your wife, but it's definitely I'll take a legendary for sure. So kudos to you with that positive pack luck within your household there. I'm curious though, you mentioned that you got a box. You kind of alluded to so far just some legendaries here and there with your box, but was there any heat pulled during the release event that you were a part of? Were there any enchanted? How many people were a part of it? What did you get a gauge of what the crowd pulled when you were there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And actually, surprisingly, I don't think there was a single enchanted pulled at the pre-release event. There was 12, 13 players, maybe 13 players, I think, at the release event. And so we made it through a case with the prize packs included. And I didn't hear about any enchanteds that were pulled, honestly, out of that case. So it was kind of a dead case, but at least it was a dead case and it got played rather than just like somebody buying it and then just ripping packs and not getting an enchanted out of it. So it feels a little bit better in that sense in my mind, but I don't think there was an enchanted pulled. There's a handful of really good legendaries that were pulled. I only saw like three other players and then a handful of other decks. I didn't see a single Cinderella on the board. So I don't know if there just weren't any in the case that we opened for that event or what happened. Or maybe I just didn't happen to walk by the table at the right time, right? But yeah, I didn't see a single Cinderella. Had the Goliath. A couple people had some Demonas, and there was a lot of the rare Ursula Whisper of Vanessa out there running around causing havoc. I mean, that's just a great card in limited too. It's a 4/5 evasive quest for 3 for 5+1 ink on the next turn or on the same turn if you have leftover ink. I mean, that's a bomb in every sense of the word. But yeah, it was fun. It was still a good time, even though there wasn't any heat pulled. Not like the Fabled release event. I think if any listeners remember back, where there was a 10-year-old, 12-year-old that ended up pulling the iconic Mickey at the Fabled release event. Nothing like that happened at this one. We didn't. I don't even think we had an enchanted that was pulled. It was still a good time though, regardless. I love a good sealed event. And hey, I'll put the plug in now. If y'all want to come up, they're doing a sealed event again this Friday. So if your schedules allow it, we're gonna try to see if we can work it in our schedule. I think my wife is interested now too. We'll see, and we'll go from there. But yeah, if y'all want to come up, we can do it again this Friday. I'm happy to run it back. It's always a good time.
I miss sealed so much. I want to make it to another sealed event for sure. It's probably my favorite limited. I do like draft too, but sealed, I don't know. There's just more of a kind of a surprise factor, I feel like, with sealed. And you're not reliant on other people passing cards, right, and taking all the good things away from you, right? I did hear, though, that there was another store that had a sealed event in the Twin Cities area. And there were like 4 or 5 enchanteds pulled. Granted, they had like 30 something players there, but there was an insane amount of enchanteds there. So maybe they got all the lucky boxes at that event rather than yours. But who knows? If you make it to next Friday, maybe they just saved the heat for this upcoming Friday at this store. You never know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe we got all the bad boxes out of the way, so now this next event will just be full of heat. Ryan, when you were talking about that Little John, I just thought of like an absolutely insane combination that card could have, where you just mentioned like burst lore up the wazoo. If you had that and a You Came Back in your hand, the turn after you play the Little John, you could quest for 9. That's insane. That one card could get you that. Well, 2 cards, right? It's a 2-card combo, but that's a lot. That's like a closing move that like if they can't remove it, it's just like the auto win. That's insane and really cool. So yeah, I second what Mack said. Something about Sealed is just incredibly fun to like build this temporary deck and have access to like the whole set of the cards. I think I like this the process of having all, in this case it's usually 72 cards, right? Where you're then going to build something from the best 40 of those. I think that's, in my mind, it almost feels like a cool little puzzle. I saw some cool stories about how, like, somebody got I think it's the 5-cost uninkable, the Detective Synergy card, where it's like when you're a detective, I think it's challenges or banishes or something. You guys can maybe correct me. But when that when other detectives do something, you get to draw a card. And in Sealed, that was, like, busted if you had the Detective Synergy, which this person did draw, or pull a bunch of detectives, so they really built the deck around that, and it was like devastating in Sealed, which like I think that's fun too, right? Is like you get to create these really cool combos, and I think you also in some ways are more likely to be able to do some of that stuff because of the fact that you have access to the whole set of 72 versus like one card from the pack, pass it, and then you just kind of get what other, like, people have kind of sifted through good stuff. Which, by the way, Ryan, I think great point about this, like, notion of top end. One of the things I continue to see, like, with a lot of these Sealed events is, like, card draw is obviously important. We've talked about that before, but, like, the bigger decks tend to do pretty well here. So, like, if you, like, get inking up to, like, 5-6, if you've got like several of those and your opponent doesn't, you just sort of eat their deck up in a way, right? Like you just have bigger characters that are trading positively and they just can't keep going because they run out of cards, because there's not enough card draw usually. I think the last time I remember like a more aggressive build being really effective in Sealed feels like maybe Azurite. You could potentially build some pretty aggressive stuff. But I feel like since then, it's usually these, like, you want to keep a lot of 5-6, like, you know, inkable big characters. That's just seems to be the play, and evasives. But we've already talked about that. We've gone down our whole Sealed route before, and some of the cards. I do want to talk with you guys about the first impressions kind of on Whispers. And I think the very first impression you could have would be, what do these cards look like? And I will say, I think this is some of my favorite card art. I think they're really amazing. And like we specifically talked about, like as we were kind of queuing up to join today, like the foiling on the Whisper cards is just amazing. Like the way that they made it look, not like it's like fully foiled on the whole card, but like also kind of not, is really fun in my mind. It just feels like a really cool design, and it's like very different than like some of the past sets foiling where the whole card was foil and then it just like pringled really fast. But that being said, I think the artwork is tremendous on these, and I am really excited to open more of it, hopefully really soon. Ryan, I'm going to take you up on that offer for this upcoming weekend, because I'm itching to open more of these, and just Sealed is so fun, and there's so many places that do it these first few weekends, and then it really kind of tapers off after that.
I'm going to second your artwork statement there. I think it's the foiling especially is incredible. To your point about the Whispers, it's like almost like some like metallic-y rainbow situation that's going on with these Whisper cards that make it look incredible. Watching too some of like the more highly sought after content creators, we'll get there eventually, right, boys? The ones that got like the free product or the product given to them. I don't know if it was free, so I shouldn't say that, but like a week or two beforehand, and did some like pre-openings. Once I saw those videos of their openings, especially the Enchanteds and the iconic Hades, I think was pulled by JDZ Quest, I believe. That's when I was seriously like, okay, this set is going to be incredible. One thing, if there's one minor critique I have, and it might just be personal preference, I tend to like the lighter shaded cards. So for example, the Hades card that Ryan doesn't seem to like, I absolutely love because that's a bright, like full of vibrant colors. This one is detective based, right? It's supposed to be spooky, so there are a lot more dark colors and very much on brand, and I very much appreciate the lore. But I was thinking with the uptick in impressive artwork over the course of the last couple sets, thinking about the next one, which I think is Winter Spell, I believe is the name. I can just envision that being more bright colors. So I think as they begin to transition to that, it just makes me more excited for not only that set, but then the following set is Pixar. So what's Woody and Buzz going to look like? They've already teased Woody and Buzz. So I think this artwork, at least for the next couple sets, are just going to continue to ramp up. But yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on product because I haven't opened anything yet, but I'm definitely still sticking to the singles route for now, and we'll talk about it a little bit more through the course of this episode and when we talk about budgeting for this set. But I want to open so much sealed product with this set because I haven't been able to like the last 2 or 3 sets. But I need to hold true, especially with some of these legendaries that I want that are quite pricey, at least upon initial release.
Yeah, Matt, because you're staring down the barrel at 4 copies of a Cinderella card that's currently going for like $60 a pop. So that's like 2 full boxes just for those 4 cards. No doubt that that is something that if you can probably find a way to build around it without having the Cinderella, find a way to cobble together other options to get the job done. But Cinderella is just so efficient, and there's so many other princesses in the Sapphire Steel combination that just makes it so much more efficient. Just so much card filtering and ramping out at the same time. Yeah, I don't blame you. The budgeting piece we will definitely get to. I wanted to go back to art for a second though, because you did mention the darker hues, and I very much appreciate that it's all like thematic around this Halloween time frame, and they're down in a well or whispers in the well, right? So they're down underground, recovering these whispers from these torn pages. Um, I will say though, the spooky site enchanted artwork has a little bit of those pops of color, especially in like the character faces and the pumpkin. I believe that there's on is on there as well, and that just like the contrast between those like pops of color and those the bright colored on the faces versus the dark background, really makes me excited. And that's probably one of my favorite artworks from the set is that spooky site enchanted, iconic Hades. I was not too excited about the artwork specifically of it. Just looking at like 2D images on, phone screens or computer screens, but seeing it on a little bit of the shimmer through the social media posts definitely has a little more shimmer to it, more depth to it than I was giving it credit for on first glance. So I am impressed with the artwork and what they were able to accomplish. And to Nathaniel's point, the foiling on the Whisper cards is just impeccable. It really makes them pop and feel extremely unique. And I think I ended up getting a foil fairy godmother. That's a steel whisper. And that's still like the card itself is like meh in terms of effect. But the foiling on it is superb. It is beautiful to look at. We have this thing or running joke that because we play all of our pack rush at night after bedtimes, it's when we happen to open an epic, we just look at it and go, man, this is really hard to look at because they're just so bright and shiny and everything's foiled and all up in your face. We do appreciate a little bit of more of the darker hues because we do end up playing a lot of these at night, and so they're a little bit easier to look at. Though the epics are still very, very shiny when they pop up all of a sudden after you pull it off the top of your deck. What are y'all's strongest decks? What do you guys think that we need to be looking out for out here in the competitive landscape?
I mean, I think Purple Steel is going to be back again. Um, so the DLC Milwaukee was won by Frank Karsten on Amethyst Steel. I think it does feel like Amethyst Steel is going to change quite a bit with this set, particularly with how powerful many of these gargoyle characters are. Ryan, you'd mentioned the Goliath card. In a way, kind of doing what Doc has historically done for that deck in just like a different way. Um, so I think that's going to be really interesting. It feels like I think the card in particular that I'm like so curious how it impacts the meta is the one that I think, Ryan, you go back to this as a historically Sapphire player, is Spooky Sight, right? Like, how much of an impact does that card have on decks going more top end to like avoid getting wiped by that? But like it's weird, right? Because you're ramping. So in some ways, right, like if you've got like a big combination, like maybe you've got a wide board and you're an Amethyst Steel player, and you've got a few, decent 1 and 2 drop characters, whatever, and then like the other half of your board is some like 4 cost characters. Maybe you're like okay with the 1 costs just like shooting into your inkwell, and all of a sudden now you have like 8 or 9 ink. As an Amethyst Steel player, you can do like tons of things now. So I'm really curious if like how much that pushes decks to get bigger, or if it does at all. Because it is an uninkable card, so it is taking up a valuable slot, and it is a great answer to many of these more aggressive decks. Like I think shout out to our Instagram, Ryan. The name that you did on the Amber Steel deck was something to the effect of like, hate to see a Spooky Sight because it just like insta loses. And I think that could potentially have an impact on like certain decks more than others, like dogs staying upright too long and just having everything get pushed in the inkwell before it can get a lot of value. Very bad. So that card I think is one that definitely is on my mind as I start to build decks early. But I'm curious, I think there has been a couple big tournaments since Whisper release. You guys inform me. I'm not in the know.
Yeah, so this past weekend there was a CCQ in Europe somewhere, and then there was one here in the States at Sharp Gaming, which I forget exactly which state that's in, but I think it's somewhere in the middle of the country. Um, and so the Sharp Gaming one was a 10K. I think it was like 100 people maybe, and the CCQ was like 200 people. Um, the It was largely dominated by the bigger decks. I believe Sapphire Steel won Sharp Gaming, and I believe Emerald Sapphire won the CCQ across the Atlantic. Um, Again, the bigger decks having all the board wipes, having all the access to those things. Um, the thing about Spooky Side, I want to go back to that for a second, and then we can dive into some of like the deck list choices and things that are happening there. Um, but the thing about Spooky Side is that just the existence of it being a possibility, a printed card, it kind of makes this like the B prep game happen again, right? In a red deck, it pre-rotation when you were playing against a Ruby deck, your opponent's on 6 ink, they're going to ink to 7, and then they're probably going to play Be Prepared if you have a whiteboard. Whether or not they have Be Prepared influences every single decision going into that turn because it's such an auto win for the Ruby player if you overextend and you commit too much to the board to now where there's no board advantage. No one has a board, but they have 5 cards and you have 1, right? So they instantly convert their hand advantage into the most important thing by just having this board wipe tool. And I think the same thing is happening with Spooky Sight, where this like your opponent's going into 6 ink, they're playing a Sapphire deck. Okay, it's going to impact how the game is played. It's going to force the Dogs deck or an Amber Emerald aggro deck or an Amber Steel aggro deck to turn everything sideways and get as much value out of it as possible, knowing there's the possibility of getting wiped. Same thing, I guess, to Ravensburger's credit, they also printed the answer to Spooky Sight in Amber decks in the same set they printed Spooky Sight in the Mowgli card. Where Mowgli is a 2-cost inkable 1/2 quest for 1 that when you play it, your opponent reveals their hand and then they choose and discard a non-character card of their choice. So not as impactful as like Ursula Deceiver, where you get to choose for your opponent which card they discard. Your opponent is choosing the least impactful option to them. But there's some skill expression there where you can, if you play it at the right time, play Mowgli at the right time, at the most opportune time, right before Spooky Sight would maybe come out. Hopefully the hand is trimmed enough where they don't have an option. They have to discard the Spooky Sight, and you can continue on your merry way, questing to 20 in the next turn. But I think that just the simple presence of Spooky Sight, like you were talking about, Nathaniel, where you have to respect it even all the way, even as soon as deck building. I'm not going to build a deck all of one, twos, and threes with no answers, no ways to get through Spooky Sight or get past Spooky Sight or get Spooky Sight out of the way, because it exists and it's in like an automatic win for the blue deck, for the Sapphire deck, if it were to happen and you've overextended onto the board. So I think that's interesting to it's such a good card that I think we're going to see this. What I'm hearing has happened in other games from other content creators is that like the existence of a card like this causes this like weird cycle to happen where the card is played and everybody's playing the card, so aggro decks are terrible. And then everybody's like, wait, this card is terrible against these big decks. Like I don't want to ramp my opponent, and they never have anything less than or 3 cost or less, so I'm not going to play it. Then all of a sudden an aggro deck wins a tournament, and you're like, wait, now everybody's playing because nobody was playing Spooky Sight that tournament because they didn't need to because they were just playing big mirrors. And then the aggro deck comes through and says, haha, got you all. And then everybody starts playing Spooky Sight again, and then aggro decks are terrible again. So it's really like picking your time to play the right deck on the right day in the right field with the right number of people being greedy enough to not play Spooky Sight, thinking they're only going to see big decks. So it'll be interesting to see where it all falls. It'll be really interesting to see where it all falls for the DLCs, because it's such a wide field. I think if somebody goes through that without even a single copy to have access to, I think would be absolutely a mad decision. And I'm very interested to see if that were to happen. What are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah. So I think Ryan, the biggest thing that came to my mind when I saw that card get printed, right? And I know that both decks will be changing quite a bit this set, but like I thought about how many times, right, like you and I have played Purple Steel into Blurple, right? And how Purple Steel has a lot of these really good, impactful 3-cost characters, right? Cobra, White Rose, the Dragon Genie that gets evasive on your turn, right? Like, there's so many of these 3-cost impactful cards. Pete even, which would block Spooky Sight. But Pete aside, right, like, all these things would get swept up by that. And one of the biggest things that ever happened when you and I played is if I wasn't far enough into the lore count by the time that your hand size was either the same or greater than mine, and you had a bigger inkwell, right? Like once you had hand and inkwell advantage, and my board was manageable, it was over, right? Like if I didn't have like the perfect burst at the end, like you're just gonna have answers to all my stuff. And so like having this option now to prevent some of that early kind of get away from you kind of snowball too quickly, I think it's going to be really interesting, and it's going to force decks like Purple Steel to probably gear a bit more towards top end, which like, yes, it certainly was trending that way already with some of the cards they've printed, right? Like Dumbo's busted, Genie's still so good. And those cards don't get swept up by that, but I feel like it does certainly make you think about the counts of specifically the 3-drop, because that was like the kind of the bread and butter like zone for a Purple Steel deck, is like really great 3-cost characters as you get into some of your like top end Genie Dumbo to refill, because you're already far enough in front to try to just like finish out before the control decks can do their control-y things. Mac, I think you had some addition to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think with something like Spooky Sights, and we were talking about aggro decks, I think if Mowgli wasn't printed and if we didn't have Pete games referee, I think Amber Steel would just be out of the game, right? The fact that Amber Steel still has, if you run 4 copies of each, you still have 8 cards in your deck that could potentially stop Spooky Sight, or at least slow Spooky Sight down for a turn, which is all an aggro deck needs to continue to be aggressive, right? And get to that finish line that if you don't get to that finish line by turn 5, you're kind of good luck, right? So I think the meta obviously is ever evolving, which I actually really appreciate, that we continue to see these not monumental shifts, but enough where like it causes you to think a lot about how you want to deck build, right? And Spooky Sight is a perfect example of that. I think another example of that are these gargoyles. So when when we're talking about strongest decks, because Sapphire was really only the spot removal color. That's all it really had in terms of like board advantage when it came to like Hades, things of that nature. But now the fact that it has a board wipe, it gained more spot removal. And on top of that, Sapphire was also just like the support color. Like it was the best support color. And it just got even better support cards with Cinderella. Seeing the results of this past weekend, Sapphire is now like the strongest color in my opinion, at least first impressions, right? It's kind of funny because when you would talk about during Worlds time and when we would talk to Scott Markinson and people of the community that were getting ready for Worlds, it was like, how do you hide Sapphire? Because Sapphire is so weak compared to the other colors at that stage in the game, and how it's completely flipped. Like Steel is always going to be strong, and I think I alluded to this too in our last week's episode, but after seeing the data over the course of this last weekend, you saw a lot of people testing out Emerald Sapphire, as expected with the, Me Malicious Scary and Prince Philip combination, as well as Sapphire Steel, everyone excited about the Cinderella Goliath combination that was now added to that specific deck. So I predict only seeing Sapphire continue to grow, or at least adjustments with Sapphire. What I appreciated, though, too, with a lot of this weekend, and thinking back on Fabled, I think people kind of already knew in Fabled what the top 4 or 5 decks were going to be on release weekend. There was a lot of variety. And if you saw like kind of the pie charts that people would put together of like what percentage decks were going on, yes, it was heavily dominated by the Emerald Sapphire and the Sapphire Steel. But instead of like 3 main decks in a tournament, there was a very colorful wheel. And we're starting to see Ruby. Ruby is not an S tier, but we're starting to see Ruby again. And I think it'll only get better over the course of the next couple sets. But that was my first impression. I'm sure the Sapphire decks are going to be the strongest first impression, but I want a wide meta. My favorite meta was actually, as much as it hurt my deck, the Hiram ban, post-Hiram ban, where we had like 10 A and S tier decks. I want to go back to that, and I think we're creeping towards that. And we're starting to see a lot of strong decks, not just the top 1 or 2 with a couple of others sprinkled in there. So that's kind of my first impression is Sapphire is really good, but we're beginning to see a wide meta again.
Yeah, I think, Mac, I second the piece about how fun it is when there's lots of really viable decks. And it does kind of beg the question, right, of like, man, what if DLC Milwaukee had just been a month later? Or, that's near Thanksgiving in the US, but like a few weeks later, right, where we're in like a Whispers, like early Whispers meta, there's probably just a lot more viable options out there. And it does feel like we kind of mentioned this, a while ago as we were talking through the Fabled meta, in the sense that the full picture isn't clear yet, right? We've just done this like big reset. So we've reprinted some cards. The card pool itself is just not that huge, and we're going to be adding to that, with Whispers being the first kind of big drop of additional cards to each one of the different, ink combinations. And it definitely feels like the power level has risen considerably across many decks, and just leveled the playing field, right? Because it definitely felt like at the end of Fabled, it was like, all right, it's Blurple, it's Purple Steel, and then it's like Emerald Sapphire, and then maybe some smatterings of like Dogs and Amber Steel. And like everything else was just like rogue. Like you mentioned, Mac, like how bad it felt testing out Blue Steel. Like it just was compared like to Emerald Sapphire, for example. And some of these other decks it felt like they just blew them out. And like the disparity in some of the specific cards, right? Like I think I talked about this in the post-Milwaukee piece of like, in these Purple Steel mirrors, like if somebody drew Dumbo and the other person didn't, it was like, all right, I win. Like that's kind of how it felt. When you add more good cards to the card pool, it takes away some of that like humongous pendulum swings. So like, for example, a blue steel player could play a Lexington now and be like, yeah, sure, play a genie. Like I'll just eat them in one go. And it's like that just, it kind of keeps back some like specific cards from being like, okay, we're both just like desperately trying to draw like one of these like 8 of my 60 cards and whoever gets there first wins the game. That doesn't feel as good as like lots of different, deviations. And, again, credit the DLC champion Frank, right? Like his deck was built what feels like to have lots of options, even in a Fabled meta when it felt like there weren't that many. He could kind of pivot and go a couple different ways. And it feels like now within these decks there are not quite so obvious linear plays where you're just desperately trying to get like your way OP overpowered cards.
No, that's a good point. And that wasn't just echoed by us, the mediocre DuckTale dads that just wanted to go 3-3 at Milwaukee, right? Like, as you were talking to like really good players, not only players within our Minnesota community, but players that we would converse with and get to know while we were there, like sentiment towards the Fable meta was frustration and excited to move on. We were all excited to be at the first, season 2 North American DLC. And I think that kind of overtook it. Everyone was still excited to be there, right? But there was still kind of this lingering, like little tiny pulse of negativity that, Fabled, once you get a certain card, you automatically win your matchup and it feels bad, right? That's kind of what I got from talking to some people that are much better than me at the game. So I think Whispers in the Well has given us kind of a breath of fresh air in the sense that, okay, options. I think people over the course of my Lorcana career or history in playing this game, like more options equals more excitement. And I think that's where we're trending. And at least that's where I'm super excited to move forward with. But I still need to get this really expensive princess card and 4 of them. Please help me.
I will say, kind of adding on to that, Mac, one of the things that I've heard through the social media I've been consuming around in the Lorcana space is that in Fabled, it was these are the 40 cards or the 45 cards that are really good. These are the ones I really want to play. How do I get to 60? I got to figure out what I'm going to push in there to fill out my deck to get to 60. It's trying to find the fluff to put in. And now with 200 new cards and a whole lot more options and the power level, like Nathaniel mentioned, just skyrocketing. It's now like I have maybe like 66 or 72 cards that I want to put into my 60 card deck. So now I'm not filling with fluff. I'm trimming fat. I'm trimming down to get to 60. I'm playing with numbers to see like, can I do 2 of here? Or do I just need a 1 of here? Or how do I save these numbers to still play the cards I want to play, but get to that 60 card? So I have more options than what I'm really trying to stuff into my deck. Whereas in Fable, it definitely felt like these are the 40 to 50 cards that I really want to play. And if I just need filler, inkable filler that I can, like, it's like when you're building a sealed deck, maybe. Like if you only have 30 good cards and you try to get to 40, well, I'm not going to pick my uninkables. I'm going to just put in a bunch of inkables. So whenever I draw them, I'm like, all right, sweet, slam that down in my inkwell and then keep playing the game from there. So it feels much better having this like surplus of option in each of the decks that I've been toying with to be like, okay, what do I need to cut? What do I want to try to figure out? Is this good or not good? And how can I play with the ratios to try to fit even more things in and give myself more options?
Yeah, and what an interesting kind of different road we're taking, guys, right? Like, I remember when we were going through, like, Arcasia and, oh my gosh, Jafar, right? Like, some of these top-tier decks were adding 0 cards from the newest sets, right? They were already just, like, so good that there just like, weren't impactful enough new cards being printed to even make their way into a set of 60 cards. I think that's wild, right? But that's kind of where we were at. And then Fabled kind of turned some things on its head where we were like, hey, I gotta like potentially have a little bit of filler fluff in here to kind of get up to 60. And now we're starting to see this like inverse of like Jafar and Arcasia where it's like, oh, I could be adding 20 or 30 cards to a specific ink combination to get up to my 60 because they're that much better than what the previous options were in the Fabled meta. I think that's really exciting that like that many new cards could be coming into some of these decks, and I think that is the most optimistic way to look at rotation. Is it like opens up that door where it's like, hey, new cards being printed, we get to play those new cards because they're actually going to have an impact.
Yeah, but I there is a downside to that. As much
Money.
as rotation is money, right? Is as much as the rotation was very much health for the game long term. I do want to talk a little bit about kind of budgeting real quick and how we're able to manage it, because with so much change in Whispers and decks adding 50% new cards, right, up to, right, it requires a lot more investment than any other like normal set release, right, because we're filling in those large gaps that of rotation. So how are you guys feeling about the budget this set? There are so many good cards that I know we want to be a part of it, and obviously we're competitive, so we want those good cards to stay competitive. So I'm curious how you're budgeting. I alluded to, I'm trying to just hold down the fort and only go for singles. That's where all of my Whispers budget is going to go. But I want to be a part of this cool hype with, I mean, take a step back. Over the last 4 sets, I think this is the most hype that people have had about opening new packs, at least in my opinion. The hype online seems crazy for this set. And it got a little bit of FOMO and want to be a part of it, but I'm trying to hold back for when they release in super stores, and I'll be able to watch the prices of Cinderella specifically decrease a little bit so that it doesn't hurt my heart as much when I do go all in on a play set that's inevitable at this point, I feel like. So how are you guys feeling?
I would second the piece about the investment. And I guess I just hope that, I don't know all of the impactful cards. I haven't probably studied as much as you guys have on all the specific cards. But, like, I love when I see, like, a black Huron, or whatever her name is, in the steel. And I see that she is an uncommon. So I'm like, okay, great. 10 cents. It's so different, right? Like, when these cards are legendaries, because with a legendary means it's so much rarer, which means that the price is just bonkers, right? Like, it's the Dumbo of Fabled, where it's like these things are crazy. Dropping $200+ on playsets is scary for a single card of a set of 4. So if you're doing that with like Amethyst Steel, and you're going to do like 8 new legendaries at 50 apiece, that starts to become really scary. So I think we'll have to see how some of that goes. But I guess you just hope and pray that your most playable impactful cards are commons and uncommons, so they're not that expensive. Because like even really playable rares, even those cards can tend to be not like super expensive, but to the point where a playset, it doesn't feel that cheap, right? Like I think genies for a while were going for like 20 at one point in this game, and that's just a rare, and a playset is now $80. So if you tack that on to some legendary money, and yeah, you're spending a lot. And Mac, I think I'm in the same boat. I tend to buy a trove for every set, or I at least try to trade for the trove box, because I store the cards in the trove box of that set. So I try to always do that. I think that'll probably be the only other like sealed product I buy, unless I participate in a sealed event, which, come on, that doesn't count. You're doing it for the sealed experience, not for pack opening, right?
Why can't it be both? Why can't it be both pack opening and the sealed experience? Is my judgment on it. We were fortunate to come into a little bit of extra cash flow, so we've been using some of our fun money, if you will, to kind of supplement and have these like late night pack rush type situations, which is partly why we do it that way, so we can actually spend some more time with the cards, opening the cards, getting more of an experience out of it, rather than just what would feel like somewhat gambling of just, here, let's just rip open all these packs and have this like massive rush of dopamine, where with having the pack rush play pattern through it, it just kind of delays that a little bit. Kind of lets you kind of sit with and interact with the cards a little bit more, and makes it feel a little bit more fulfilling in that regard. So in terms of budgeting, going to pick up a single here or there when I think I might need it, but doing my darndest to just try to hope that I'm pulling the right legendaries, and then with whatever legendaries I do have, making some trades, trying to get things to, even out across that board rather than having to try to buy things, but just trying to supplement with some of the legendaries maybe I don't want to play with, but other people are looking to play with, to try to like reallocate resources that I was able to come through the box openings. So that's kind of where I'm at, looking at for
Yeah.
a few different singles, but trying not to spend too much in that regard, just to try to keep this relatively manageable. There was a this is an interesting point on the budgeting piece because um, obviously there's this, pay for success kind of expectation almost in many trading card games where um, outside looking in, new person comes into the game, they say, you know what? If I just buy the best deck, I get to win everything, right? That's how it goes. If I pay the money to buy the best cards, that means I win because I have the better cards in play. That's not necessarily true, especially not in Lorcana for that matter, compared to some other trading card games that I've heard about. As kind of a prime example of that, if we look at even just DLC Milwaukee, look at the top 16, top 8, top 16 decks. Obviously, yes, Amethyst Sapphire decks were spendy because Dumbo was expensive. Same with Amethyst Steel. Dumbo was expensive, so it drove up the price of those decks. But in direct competition with those two decks was Amber Emerald, Sea Dogs or Chroma Dogs or the Dogs list, an aggro list that has Under the Sea or Emerald Chromacon or both or whatever. Without Tiana, which many of those lists were not running Tiana, those decks were coming in like just under $100 each. Whereas the Amethyst Sapphire, the Amethyst Steel decks were kind of in that like 250 to 350 price range because Dumbo itself was driving up the price astronomically. Um, and there was a top four on Amber Emerald. There was two in the top eight or three in the top eight in at DLC Bologna on Amber Emerald. So like this relatively inexpensive deck is fully in contention and is easily considered maybe one of the best decks in the format with the highly expensive decks out there. So it's not necessarily pay to win, pay to play. It's just, yes, there are some very good cards that read very well, that have very strong effects and allow you to do very powerful things in this game. That being said, there is still a pathway to success that can be found with a budget deck, if you will, or a cheaper, more inexpensive deck that still is high card quality and still has great play lines and still is taking advantage of certain aspects of the game that are very strong. Uh, it's not necessarily that you have to have the best deck to win everything. It's that you can, if you practice on a deck and you're very familiar with it, regardless of how expensive it is, if you have the right level of card quality and the right format, um, I think that there's still a possibility to find success even with an inexpensive deck or a relatively inexpensive deck. That was just a couple of thoughts that were running through my head. Thanks for letting me share those and get those out there. One of our listeners, we talked about them, I believe, before when we met them at DLC Milwaukee, Paul and Casper, had brought that question up, and I think it was a very valid one. I wanted to kind of let my thoughts get out into the world through this podcast.
Yeah, so I think on that, Ryan, you kind of talk about like enough practice, right? Like with certain decks. I think it's a good opportunity for us to maybe get into this playful banter that we've occasionally gone back to. So I'll put the question out there for y'all. I feel like I've been gone for like a lot of the times we've done this. So I like hear the perspective from you guys when I'm listening back to the episode. But who do you think needs the least amount of practice to master a deck of the DuckTale Dads? Mack, you go first.
Go first. Minnesota, nice. I can't be mean. So here's how do I skirt around this? Nathaniel, I don't think it's you. I just think you practice so much with or have been playing Amethyst Steel for so long. I think that's maybe limited you in trying to learn new decks. Although you did dive into the Shark build, right? I think you like to get reps and you always like to practice. So, and I feel like too, Ryan, you're so methodical in your play that you're always thinking about new play lines. So I think whether you think one way is the best way this week, you think about something, and then a new way is the best way the next week. So it takes you time to really get to know the ins and outs. I think out of the three of us, I don't think the three of us are very good at mastering a deck very quick. Out of the three of us, I think I'm the one that's fully more of the send it mode. Like, I'm just gonna, if I get away from Ruby Sapphire, and the last couple sets have forced me to get away from Ruby Sapphire, just sending it and just playing a deck just for funsies, I tend to do pretty well when I do that. I think back on our fun friend nights when, other than Nathaniel's overpowered Beauty and the Beast deck, I've done fairly well in all of our kind of friend theme nights. I tend to do very well in sealed and draft, I've noticed, in limited, other than my first kind of like slap to the face and then my very first sealed experience when I went 0-3. I've gone either 2-1 or 3-0 in everything that I've done ever since then, because I took a lot of lessons learned from that. So out of the scale, if it's out of 10, I'll put myself at a solid 5. I'll put probably both of you are probably around a 4, but I'll do Nathaniel 3 and Ryan 4. That's what I got. Please punch back.
I think, okay, so good assessment. One of the things I think that you nailed, Mac, is Ryan noodles a lot and does a lot of the tweaking. He thinks about like the direction of the meta and what cards become more valuable, what cards need to come out. He's talked about that on the podcast too, right? And I think that was shown to me in very clear terms last set when we were doing a lot of that practicing that you were talking about, right? And like early on in the set, I was doing really well with Purple Steel, even into Blurple. And Ryan was like, I don't like this. And like was able to basically get the right combination of cards slotted in that stopped the latest iteration of Purple Steel from doing what it wanted to do the way that it wanted to do it, right? So he could then get kind of back to like I feel like it's like a song and dance with some of these decks and kind of the direction that they're going in. And I think what Blurple tends to try to do into like an Amethyst Steel build is it generally wants to just get over it, right? So like, what cards are you going to play? And then what cards am I going to play in response to that to minimize the impact of the Amethyst Steel long enough where eventually my big deck has taken over. And I think that became very clear that like Ryan was figuring out the particularly powerful cards in that matchup specifically. And he had even mentioned this too, right? Like when we got to our like impromptu tournament that we just sort of self-organized and Hannah and Christian had so graciously organized before Milwaukee DLC, where Ryan was like, I felt great going into this big wide Minnesota Purple Steel meta, right? Because he had done the homework to have the right impact cards to stop that deck dead in its tracks. So I think you nailed it on that. Ryan does a great job of identifying what are like our S tier decks? What are the cards I need to have to handle those decks? And then when I see those two ink colors, I know the direction I'm going to be taking. And it comes with some practice and a lot of noodling.
But what's your ranking?
Yeah, I feel like you're beating around the bush here.
I would say I will give myself some credit for specifically response to Christian's challenge. Last set, running. I mean, Steel Song was at one point like felt kind of like best deck, but like doing Shark in like a post Hiram era and still doing like well with that deck. But again, it's still like a really powerful deck, so you're kind of expected to do fairly well. So I think I'll give myself a 4 for that, Mac, that I was able to with relatively. I still did practice though, right? Like I can't even sit here and say like, oh, I just sent it, right? Like the only time in recent memory I'm just gonna send it as far as like a deck went was Infinity, and I did not have fun, and I wanted to be done pretty fast. So yeah, I think for me, I tend to really want to practice, so I do feel very familiar with the cards, and I have at least a good idea of, okay, this is the ink combination that my opponent is running. Here's how I'm going to respond. And what that's really manifested itself into, we've talked about like the different ways you can practice, some of them being against, friends on webcam or in person, or like reps against like AI tools. I've tended to practice a lot against aggressive decks because I just get frustrated losing to those where it just feels like, oh gosh, the game's over before it started. And so like that has been a lot of my, like if I can choose the exact set of 60 cards I'm going to practice against, it's usually how do I stop aggro long enough to like prevent them from just winning like immediately. And then I rely on you guys to, tear my hair out with those big, huge control decks. So I'll give myself 4. I think Ryan 4 just because he does noodle the most and he goes back and forth on cards and convinces himself and then unconvinces himself. So it takes time, but he definitely optimizes his deck by taking that time. And I'd say, yeah, Mac, I mean, you did have the advantage in Milwaukee from an Infinity perspective on having had historic reps with Ruby Sapphire. But I think yeah, maybe from a least practice perspective and still having some success, I think I'll give you the nod on 1 point higher than us. And 5, 4, and 4 sounds accurate.
So everybody's down around 500 right now. I would argue that I would rate myself higher than that. I would rate myself at least a 6 for mastering a deck relatively quickly. Example A. Reign of Jafar set champs. I pivoted off of Amethyst Sapphire because it's a lot of fun. I just wanted to try something else in response to Christian's challenge. I decided to go the opposite end of the spectrum with some like aggro-y, mid-rangey Amber Steel. I got maybe like 10 reps, maybe 10 reps, probably closer to 6 on the deck prior to playing it at the set champs and was top 4. So Exhibit A, great result there. Kiwi, trying something new with Sapphire Steel in set 7, felt pretty good on it right away, was optimizing it, had some, obviously got a lot of reps in on it, and then they banned Hiram, and I was like, no, never mind, I'm going to go back to what I knew. But I do feel like I was very competitive on it and finding a lot of success with it into both of Amethyst Steel and Ruby Sapphire up till that point through our like online testing. So I would rank myself at least a 6. I would also give Mack a 6. I would give Nathaniel, you can have a 4. I'll give you a 4. I do think that you did a fantastic job, Nathaniel, in responding to Christian's challenge and taking on multiple different decks that set. And I think that Mac obviously showed great transition skills in being able to swap from Ruby Sapphire to two different deck colors, having 2 options going into DLC Milwaukee of which deck am I going to play? I don't know yet, but I could probably play either of these, which is highly impressive, as I was just hard stuck on one single ink pair and trying to figure out the matchups for that. But I would still say that I would rank myself a 6. I would give Mac a 6, and I would give Nathaniel a 4. Depends on the day whether Mac or I are going to come out on top. Sealed is obviously a different skill set, and I think Mac is very skilled at it, obviously, from results. I also feel like I'm getting more comfortable with it too, so there's something to be said there. But I just haven't had the reps. I don't have the track record that Mac does against the upper echelon of players like he had in that Sealed Cube and in his other endeavors previous to that too. So that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, I think a big thing there, right, is just like how comfortable you can get in as minimal amount of time. And yeah, I mean, I think definitely a thing that, Sealed definitely tests that, right? Because you don't have time to test things out, and it's kind of just play what you're given with. It's a good way to kind of flex some of those muscles and train those up. And on that note, definitely hoping that we can all get to some of that pretty soon here. Because we are officially in the Whispers meta, beautiful cards, and it does seem like a healthier meta for just kind of the constructed decks, but also one that can be pretty fun for these sealed events. So if that's something for listeners, right, like maybe you've been kind of considering doing more of those, or maybe you haven't done it before, I think I speak for all of us when I say, like, go try this if that interests you, because it genuinely is a ton of fun, and you tend to learn a lot about like impactful cards that are maybe amazing in sealed and terrible or not that great in constructed, or vice versa, right? Like I remember people were pulling Tamatoa Happy as a Clam, and like in Arcasia, like sealed events, which was a hugely impactful card, and in sealed it was like, all right, and I'm gonna put that in a top loader and put it off to the side. Like he was bad, objectively bad in sealed. So kind of funny, right? Maybe not that bad because he is still a big body quest for 2, 6 cost, but like there just were probably better cards for that particular ink cost. So yeah, anyhow, appreciate y'all listening. You can find us again on Instagram. We do tend to post there. We've been posting a little more frequently lately on Instagram, so you can find some content there, pack openings, some deck lists there as well. We also are available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. You can find us there. Otherwise, we'll see you all soon. And gentlemen, let's get the duck out of here.